Imagine a world where history took a terrifying turn. A world where World War II ended in a way no one expected. What if Hitler had won? How would global politics look today? How would we be living? What would be left of freedom? In this animated documentary, we dive into one of history's darkest what-ifs, uncovering hidden plans, chilling strategies, and the true impact of a regime that could have changed everything forever. Get ready for shocking revelations, little-known facts, and a deep exploration of an alternate reality that almost became true. Now tell me, where are you watching this from? I'll be reading every comment. Look at this baby. So gentle, so innocent. This child, destined to grow up into an honest man, right? Well, think again. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 in a small town in Austria-Hungary. His full name? Adolphus Hitler. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, was originally born out of wedlock, a stigma in those times, but eventually changed his surname to that of his stepfather, becoming Alois Hitler. Alois was a mid-level Austrian customs officer. He wasn't exactly rolling in wealth, but he certainly had a way with women. His love life was as complicated as his future son's ambitions. Alois first married a wealthy, older woman, securing himself a comfortable lifestyle. But soon after, he started having affairs, including one with a much younger house servant. He eventually left his sick wife to be with his mistress, but since the Catholic Church didn't allow divorce, he was stuck. So, he waited, and waited, until his wife passed away. Then he wasted no time and married his mistress, with whom he had a child. But life had a cruel sense of irony. His new wife also fell ill, leaving him in need of someone to care for her. That's when he employed his much younger cousin, Clara, to look after her. And when his wife died, history repeated itself. He immediately got Clara pregnant and then married her. Yes, his own cousin. Quite the family tree. Clara and Alois had 3 children together, but tragedy struck hard and fast. Each of them died in infancy. The loss devastated Clara, but when she gave birth to her 4th child, Adolf, she became fiercely protective, spoiling him endlessly out of fear that she would lose him too. The couple went on to have 2 more children, but the family's constant relocations meant Adolf had to attend 5 different elementary schools. Alois was a strict, hot-tempered man, and he ruled his household with an iron fist. He took most of his frustration out on his eldest son, who eventually had enough and ran away from home at the age of 14. That left 7-year-old Adolf to take on more responsibilities, chores, expectations, and, of course, the full brunt of his father's anger. The household became a battlefield. As a result, Hitler developed a difficult and tense relationship with his father, but he remained deeply attached to his mother, who constantly worried about his health and well-being. Despite the turmoil at home, Hitler did well in school, at first. His grades were solid, teachers praised him, and he was popular among his classmates. He had a knack for leadership and enjoyed organizing the other children to play elaborate war games. He also had a love for reading, immersing himself in adventure stories, particularly tales about cowboys and Native Americans. But as he grew older, a rebellious streak began to emerge. He started getting into trouble, smoking, organizing mischief, and even leading a raid on a local orchard. His defiance wasn't just limited to schoolyard antics. He openly challenged his religious teacher, mocking him with symbolic gestures that signified his belief in a unified Germanic people, directly opposing the rule of the Habsburgs in Austria. His father, a staunch Austrian official, was furious. Every act of defiance was met with severe punishment. The region where Hitler grew up had once been part of the German Confederation, and many of its residents identified more as German than Austrian. But Hitler's nationalist beliefs weren't just shaped by history, they were also a product of rebellion. Whatever his father believed, he opposed. And since his father represented the Austrian state, Hitler became obsessed with the idea of German nationalism. This only intensified their already volatile relationship, leading to even harsher punishments. Then, tragedy struck again. His 6-year-old brother, whom Adolf deeply loved, died of measles when Hitler was just 10 years old. The pain of losing his brother left a deep scar, and neighbors began to notice a change in him. He developed strange behaviors, talking to trees, spending long nights staring at the stars from the cemetery walls, lost in thought. His interest in religion faded, and his school performance started to deteriorate. It also didn't help that he had just entered high school, where city boys looked down on him, treating him like a rural outsider. He struggled to fit in. His grades plummeted, forcing him to repeat a grade. The strict school environment and rigid curriculum didn't interest him. He preferred to spend his time immersed in books and art. Despite his academic struggles, he had a real talent for drawing, something that would later play a major role in his aspirations. What began as a boyhood filled with imagination, war games, and storytelling was now transforming into something else, something darker. One day, his father looked at him and said, "Son, one day you'll be a great public official, just like me. A respectable man with a steady job, a secure future." But Adolf? He had other plans. "No, father," he said defiantly. "I'm going to become an artist. I'll soar high above the clouds, free like the eagles." His father was enraged. A life of art? That was no life at all. It was unstable, foolish, the fantasy of a dreamer. But Alois Hitler was an old man by then, tired, worn down. He didn't have the same fire to keep fighting his son on this. So he let it go. And then, just like that, he was gone. A lung hemorrhage took him, leaving Adolf without his greatest adversary. With his strict father no longer looming over him, Hitler barely scraped through his final semester of school. But instead of feeling relieved or hopeful for the future, he celebrated in a way that perfectly symbolized his growing disdain for authority. By getting blackout drunk and using his school certificate as toilet paper. It didn't matter anyway. He never even bothered to take the final school exam. Instead, he simply dropped out. Now 16, he was unemployed, aimless, and drifting through life with no real sense of direction. And for the next 3 years, that's exactly how things stayed. While others his age were finding careers, learning trades, and building their futures, Hitler spent his days indulging in art, reading, and going to the opera with his only real friend, August Kubizek. Kubizek would later write about his memories of young Adolf, describing him as someone who was obsessively passionate about many things, convinced that he was superior to those around him. He was hot-tempered, much like his father, and had a rare talent for speech. When he got going on one of his rants, it was impossible to ignore him. At 18, determined to pursue his dreams, Hitler left his small-town life behind and traveled to Vienna to take the entrance exam for the Academy of Fine Arts. He was confident, perhaps even arrogant, believing his destiny was waiting for him in the grand city. But reality struck hard. He failed. His work wasn't good enough. The Academy rejected him outright. Devastated but not yet defeated, Hitler returned home, where an even greater tragedy awaited him. His beloved mother was sick. Very sick. Her health was deteriorating rapidly, and this time there was no escape, no second chance. Hitler stayed by her side, watching helplessly as the illness consumed her. When she finally passed away, the family doctor, who had seen countless cases of grief, would later say, that he had never witnessed anyone as utterly broken as Adolf Hitler was at that moment. With his mother gone, Hitler was truly alone. Still clinging to his artistic ambitions, he returned to Vienna, hoping for another chance. But that dream was already dead. Without the support of his parents, he struggled to survive. Vienna, a city of grandeur and culture, became his personal nightmare. He fell into poverty, living in and out of homeless shelters, barely scraping by on the few coins he earned from selling small painted postcards. He was no longer a promising artist. He was a drifter, a nobody. It's difficult to pinpoint the exact moment when Hitler's extremist ideology took root, but there is little doubt that his time in Vienna played a crucial role. The city was a hotbed of anti-Semitism, and Hitler, angry, desperate, and searching for something or someone to blame for his failures, absorbed these toxic ideas like a sponge. The mayor of Vienna, a man whom Hitler admired, was an open and vocal anti-Semite. Countless newspapers and pamphlets spread conspiracy theories about Jews, painting them as the enemy. Hitler devoured this propaganda, becoming convinced that the world was locked in a struggle between races, the strongest, in his mind, being the Germanic Aryan people. The weakest, the Jews. Austria-Hungary was a vast, multi-ethnic empire filled with people of different backgrounds and cultures, and to Hitler, this diversity was not a strength, it was a disease. He resented it, he despised it. And so, at 24, he made a decision. He left Vienna behind and moved to Munich, Germany, to avoid being drafted into military service for Austria-Hungary, a country he had grown to hate. But life in Munich was no easier. For another year, he drifted aimlessly, barely surviving, until something happened. Something that would change everything. In 1914, tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface of Europe for decades finally boiled over. Political alliances, long-standing rivalries, and territorial disputes erupted into a full-scale conflict that would soon engulf the entire continent. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria was the spark that ignited the fire, and within weeks, the world was at war. In every major city, crowds gathered in the streets, waving flags, singing patriotic songs, and cheering for what many believed would be a swift and glorious victory. Young men enlisted in droves, eager to fight for their countries, swept up in a wave of nationalistic fervor. But for Hitler, war was more than just a patriotic duty. It was a calling, a chance to prove himself, a chance to belong to something greater than his lonely, drifting existence. Within days, he eagerly volunteered for the German army, enlisting in the 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment. For the first time in years, he had a sense of direction. The battlefield became his new home, the trenches his proving ground. The mud, the blood, the deafening roar of artillery, none of it deterred him. If anything, it fueled him. The camaraderie of his fellow soldiers provided the brotherhood he had never truly known. Despite the horrors of war, the ceaseless explosions, the sight of friends torn apart by machine gun fire, Hitler would later describe this period as the best time of his life. He proved himself a capable and daring soldier, often volunteering for dangerous reconnaissance missions. His courage under fire earned him the Iron Cross First Class, a prestigious military decoration rarely awarded to soldiers of his rank. But more than skill, Hitler possessed something else: luck. Time and time again, he found himself in situations where death seemed certain, yet he always managed to escape unscathed. His comrades fell around him, but he endured. That luck, however, finally ran out in 1916. During a brutal battle on the Western Front, an artillery shell ripped through the air, exploding with deafening force. Shrapnel tore into his leg, and he was carried off the battlefield, wounded but alive. Sent back to Germany to recover, Hitler expected to find a nation standing strong, united in the fight. Instead, what he saw horrified him. The war had drained the German people of their spirit. The economy was in ruins, food was scarce, and civilians were starving. Factories struggled to keep up with war production. But worst of all, a growing anti-war sentiment was spreading among the people. Talk of surrender, of seeking peace, was whispered in the streets. To Hitler, this was nothing short of treason. He had fought, suffered, and bled for Germany, only to return to a country that seemed to be giving up. As soon as he was able, he requested to return to the front lines. Germany's enemies were relentless, and he was determined to do his part in securing victory. But in 1918, fate struck again. During a night raid, the British launched a gas attack. A thick, choking cloud of mustard gas rolled across the trenches. Soldiers scrambled for their masks, but Hitler wasn't fast enough. The gas seared his eyes and lungs, leaving him temporarily blinded. He was evacuated to a military hospital in Pasewalk, where he lay in darkness, unable to see as the war raged on without him. It was there, in that hospital bed, that he received the news that shattered him to his core. Germany had lost. The war was over. The mighty German Empire had surrendered. The dream of victory had crumbled into dust. The Treaty of Versailles, the document that officially ended the war, was not just a peace agreement, it was a punishment. The terms were brutal. Germany was forced to accept full responsibility for the war, a humiliation that enraged its people. The nation was burdened with staggering reparations, plunging it into economic despair. Its military was reduced to a mere fraction of its former strength, its pride stripped away. And as if that weren't enough, Germany itself was carved apart. New nations rose from the ruins of Austria-Hungary, reshaping the map of Europe. But the greatest insult of all, in Hitler's eyes, was the creation of the Polish Corridor, an artificial strip of land that split Germany in two, severing East Prussia from the rest of the country. As he lay in his hospital bed, blinded and broken, something inside Hitler changed. His sorrow turned to rage. His despair hardened into hatred. He refused to accept that Germany had been truly defeated on the battlefield. No, he believed it had been betrayed from within, stabbed in the back. And in his mind, there was one group responsible for that betrayal: the communists, the Jews, the politicians who had surrendered. These were the enemies he would now dedicate his life to fighting. The war was over, but for Hitler, a new battle had just begun. For Hitler, this was unthinkable. His homeland, the country he loved, was being torn apart and humiliated on the world stage. And as he lay in that hospital, blinded and broken, something inside him hardened. His heart filled with hatred, not just for Germany's enemies, but for those he believed had betrayed the nation from within. Communists, Jews, traitors. In his mind, they were the ones responsible for Germany's downfall. They had spread anti-war propaganda. They had weakened the spirit of the German people. They had, as he would later claim, stabbed Germany in the back. This hatred would drive him forward. It would consume him. And soon, the world would come to know his name,